Welcome to Learnit Training. The exercise files for today's course are located in the video description below. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Hello and welcome to Power BI Intro to Data Analysis Part 3. There's a Part 2 and Part 1 before this. Today's session's on advanced analysis as well as sharing insights. A recap of Part 2, in case you're wondering what we covered in Part 2. We went over creating basic visuals. Things like the bar chart, line chart, pie chart were put together. We learned about the formatting options that we have available for all these visuals. Then we went into creating slicers, timelines, filtering, as well as the formatting options behind these visuals. We learned about App Source and how you can install and import custom visualizations for your report needs. And we also created bookmarks and selections to help us create interactive and user-friendly reports. Part 3 is going to do an introduction to DAX analysis expressions, data analysis expressions, DAX. We're going to do an introduction to DAX and learn about basic DAX functions as well as calculations. Understand time intelligence in Power BI. Use features for data insights. Basic forecasting techniques. Ultimately publish to Power BI service. And then we can see how we can share this data with others. And then we'll do a recap of the entire series.
Looking to support our channel and get a great deal? Become a member today to unlock ad-free videos. That's right, your favorite courses without a single ad. Interested in a specific video? Purchase one of our ad-free courses individually. Looking for even more? Gain access to exams, certificates, and exclusive content at LearnitAnytime.com. More information can be found in the video description below.
Let's get into DAX. I'm in our Power BI report file. And in this Power BI report file that we've gone through in Part 1 and Part 2, we have a couple of tables. One that we created called Calendar, a table that we imported called Customer, which tracks the customer ID, the customer name, and the region. If I go to products here, I have product ID, product name, category, and price. If I click on T sales, I have the sales ID, date, product ID, customer ID, quantity, and total sales. Data analysis expressions are a powerful formula language, very similar to Excel functions, and it's used for Power BI data modeling. And we saw a little bit of it when we created our calendar table in Part 1, but it allows you to create custom calculations and aggregations to gain deeper insight from your data. Now, today we're going to be exploring the essentials of DAX. We're going to be learning about things called measures, which are single cell calculations that you can do that avoid a row context filter. And we'll also learn about creating calculated columns. We've already spent some time creating a calculated table with the calendar one from Part 1. I use the calendar auto function in DAX to return the table. And then I use the format function as well as the month function, format, and the year function. So we'll be seeing more DAX functions that we'll use to aggregate, create custom calculations within our data set. Let's get started. I'm in the table view in Power BI, and I'm also looking at the table sales from the data pane. And one of the functions that I want to start with DAX is called the SUM function. What this does is it's going to help me calculate the sum of a column. Like, for example, if I want to sum up the total quantity sold, I have this DAX formula to help me. I'm going to create a new measure here in DAX. Be sure to be in the correct table where you want your measure to be located, although you can move it later. I'm going to select the new measure option. Write a DAX expression that calculates a value from your data. So this formula bar at the top allows me to name the DAX expression. If it's a measure, I like to start it with MM for my measures. Underscore, I'll call it total. underscore quantity. And I'll set that equal to the DAX function sum. Now you can use your drop-down arrows to select items from this list, but if you click on the tab key, it will auto-select it for you. The sum function is going to require a column name, but you have to tell it what table you want to pull from. So here it's listing all the different columns from all the different tables, starting with calendar to T customers to T products. And then there I go over to T sales. If I select the tab key here, if I close the parenthesis here, I'm going to hit enter and I've just created my first measure in the sales table here. I can see my measures available there. Notice how it's not showing up in the table, in the column here, but I could use this. I could use this in a visual now. We'll see that on a new page in just a second. Now there is some best practices for your measures. Naming them in alphabetical order with MM is extremely helpful. I want to mention that if you go over to the modeling view and you select your measure, see how I selected it? I can enter in a display folder name to create a folder to hold all my measures at the top of the table in the data pane. So I'm going to call this one measures. And just so it shows up at the very top of the data pane, I'm going to put AAA measures. And when I hit enter here, it's going to move that measure I have selected to the AAA measures here. So that's my first measure I just created. Let me go over to my report view now, and I'll add in a new page to the end of the Power BI report file. I'm going to add in a table here. I'm going to add in some of the sales information, like the product ID and the quantities, maybe even the product names. I'll put the product name in front of the product IDs. But now if I add this measure, I can use a measure to track the total quantity. This ensures it avoids row context filtering. Now, to give more flexibility with the data set, I recommend to use your measures in the columns instead of the field itself. I'm going to remove the sum of quantity there. Now I have my quantity measure. I can also use another visual called the card visual to display my measures on the report page. Let's talk about the SUMX function next. Next, we're going to use the SUMX function. This is going to calculate the sum of an expression evaluated for each row in a table. This is useful when we need to perform a row-by-row calculation before summing. For instance, if we needed to calculate the total sales amount, we can get the quantity and the total sales and multiply them. If I go over to the Home tab and I create a new measure, I'll call this one MM, total sales amount. And I'll use the SUMX function. Returns a sum of an expression evaluated for each row in a table. And the table I want to give it is going to be the T sales table. And the expression that I want to do row by row is I want to get the sales table quantity and multiply it by the sales. Total sales. If I close this parenthesis here, I'll have a new measure calculating the total sales amount multiplying the quantity in the total sales. And of course, I can just drag and drop my new measure to the folder. Wait, is it going to let me? I may stand corrected there. Oh, 1 second there. Let me do it for the model view. Oh, huh. Could have sworn an update allowed me to do that where I can drag and drop it. I'm going to still get this and I'm going to move it to the folder. Measures. If I go over to my report view, and I add in the total sales amount measure, which multiplies the quantity in the sales, so it's going to be much larger. I can see that each row is showing me the correct value for the quantity sold. Now, I just want to mention, if you name your measures like this, you can always rename the measure from the field list over here. I can rename it for the visual and I can call it total quantity. I can rename it for the visual from here. I'm going to call it total sales amount. And if I need to, I can reorder the order of the columns. Now I'm going to go over to the formatting option for the visual, and I'm going to just search for font, and I'm going to increase the font size to that. Got a nice big table we can read. And I'm also just going to add in a card. For the total sales amount now. So go ahead and give this a try. Try putting together a new measure. I'm going to select this measure. This is the formula for it. This is automatically set to currency because I'm using currency values in the measure, so the data type gets assigned to it. The average function's coming up next. To find the average of the quantity of products sold, I can use this formula here. I'm going to select a new measure. I'll call it MM for my measure. I'll call it average, AVG, quantity is equal to. I'll pass the average function. I'll pass the T sales table, quantity column. Close the parenthesis. Once I create the measure and I select it here, I can go over to the model view and add the display folder name I want to move it to. AAA measures. Go back to my report page view and I'm going to select a card. And I'll go ahead and add that new measure I just added in. Looks like the average quantity is 8.5. I can also add that measure to the table if I needed to as well. So, I'm sure now we're wondering, how am I ever going to learn all of these DAX functions? Not to be alarmed, there is an online reference guide here that's available for us to use. And the DAX reference guide is absolutely free to download if you need to. And it goes through various functions that you have. We're using aggregation functions right now. Like what we went through was the average function. And look, there's a full definition, return values, remarks, different examples that we have. So be sure to check out these support pages for specific functions that you need help and guidance with. They're actually all here so far, the ones that we've covered. There's my sum and my SUMX as well. All very similar formats. So these are the DAX support pages that you can find online. Here, the SUMX function. This one goes row by row for the table. So you give it a table and the expression that you want to do for each row. Oh, this one has a more advanced example with a filter, where the sales territory ID is equal to 5. They're going to sum up the fright. So when in doubt, you don't have to memorize all the syntax and all of the DAX functions. I believe there's a little bit over 250 of them that are available. But when it comes time to, it's helpful to know that you can search through them to figure out what function you need to use, ultimately giving you more flexibility in the report needs that you're trying to create and showcase on the report page. So the average function is what we just covered here. And then I moved it over to the folder. And this is a measure that I have available that I can use across my report now. Go ahead and give this a try. The formula's on the screen. When we come back, we're going to learn about a pretty cool function called calculate, which helps you modify the filter context of a calculation. The next function I want to cover is called calculate. Calculate is one of the most powerful DAX functions. It allows you to modify a filter context of a calculation. For example, we can calculate the total sales for a specific product, like product 101. The calculate function evaluates an expression in a modified filter context. So it's going to ask for an expression that you're going to give it, and then a filter, and an optional additional filter if you need it. Let's see some examples. So it needs a Boolean expression. A Boolean expression filter is an expression that evaluates the true or false. There are several rules they must abide by. They can reference columns from a single table. They cannot reference measures. They cannot use a nested calculated function. Beginning September of 2021, they cannot use functions that scan or return a table unless they are passed as an argument to aggregate functions. They can contain an aggregate function that returns a scalar value. The total sales on the last date selected. Notice how this is using the sum function on the sales amount. It's filtering for the sales date order key, the max order date key. The table expression filter applies to the table object as a filter. You can use the filter function to apply complex filtering conditions, including those that cannot be defined by a Boolean filter. Let's see if there's an example here. The following sales table measure definition produces a revenue result, but only for the products that have a blue color. So this is the blue revenue calculate function. It's using calculate. It's summing the sales amount, but the filter here is looking in the product color and making sure that it's equal to blue. And here's our blue revenue for accessories, bikes, clothing, components, totals. The calculate function evaluates the sum of the sales table sales amount column in a modified filter context. The new filter is added to the product table for color column. The filter overwrites any filter that's already applied in the column. The revenue percent total channel. This is removing the filters from channel. So let's see the calculate function in action. I'm going to create a new measure, and let's just call it total sales for product 101. And I'll set that equal to the calculate function. If I hit Shift Enter, it goes to a new line. I'm going to pass the sum function as my expression, and I'm going to use the T sales table, total sales column. And the filter here that I'm going to add in, let me close the parenthesis. The filter here, I'm only going to do one filter. It's going to be the T sales product ID is equal to 101. Close the parenthesis. I'll probably put this one on a new line. I'll hit Shift Enter as well. Expression and the filter. If I go back over to my report view, I'm going to add in, well, let me move it over from the model view. Let's follow our best practices. I'm going to move this into the folder correctly. AAA measures. I can see that there's only sales for product 101. Product ID 101, 1700. Everything else is blank. It ignores all other filtering context. I'm going to add in a card for this one as well. So this could easily be updated, right? This measure here, easily be updated to maybe do 102, 103, 104, and you can have a filter for each product total sales. I'm going to go back over to the table view. I'm going to copy this formula, Control Copy, create a new measure, paste it in. This one I'll do it for product 102. I'll update the name, update the filter, create the measure. If I go over to the model view, I can move it over to the appropriate display folder. Now it's 500 for product 102. I'll go ahead and add in a card here. I'm running out of space, so I'll go down. And if I need to keep doing that for each product, how many products do I have total? 2 more. I can add in a new measure. Paste the result, just change it to 103 for the title. Change it to 103 for the filter. Commit the change. Just got to move over to the model view. Move it over to the measures folder. I'll add that in. If I select the card again, product 103. And the final one, new measure. 104. Gonna go over to my model view, put it into the correct display folder. And just like we've been doing, just to showcase the result, I'll update it to the table. And then I'll add in my card or my measure as well. When we come back, we'll play around with the filter function in Power BI. Another useful function that we should discuss is called the filter function. The filter function returns a table that's a subset of another table or expression. Maybe I want to return a table of the filtered sales transactions where the total sales amount is above 700. So I'm going to create a new table this time. And it says table is equal to, I'm going to call it sales, I'll do T underscore sales above 700. Table sales above 700, and I'll pass the filter function to it. The table that I want to filter is the sales table. The filter expression is I want to check the table sales. The total sales greater than 700. When I hit enter here, check out the result that I have now, this new table that I've added in. Check this out. Now I have a new table that I've added in. Of course, I would probably connect it from product ID to product ID as well. So, if I want to showcase this table, I'm going to add in another table here at the top. I have a table now that I can use. That just shows sales above 700. How cool is that? How quick was that to make? A single formula produced a whole new visual that I can showcase. So if I go over to these support pages here, I can always read about the filter function, a Boolean expression. You can use the filter function to reduce a number of rows in a table that you are working with. It's usually used as a function that's embedded into an argument. Avoid using filter as the filter argument. Use count rows instead of count index. And we have various examples for the filter function here if we need it. Go ahead and try out the filter function. And we're going to go into the related table function next. Here's the function on the screen here for us. This was a new table DAX expression, not a new measure DAX expression. One does a single value calculation, one returns a table of calculations. Huge difference between the two, and your functions that return tables will not work if you select new measure. Vice versa as well, your functions that return a new measure will not work for new table. So be sure that you click the appropriate one. We've learned about creating new measures. We've learned about creating new tables. I want to talk about creating calculated columns. So I have the T sales table here selected. And I want to create a new calculated column for the table. There is a relationship function called related. It returns a related value from another table. So any table that has a relationship with the sales table, it can pull that column into the sales table. So like what if we wanted to add the product names? Based off the product IDs, I want to add the product names of each product that we sold to the sales table. If I create a new column here, this really matters that you're in the correct table when you do this, right? Because I have to add it to T sales. There is a function in DAX called related. It just needs a column. The column that contains the values you want to retrieve. I want the product names. The related function requires that a relationship exists between the current table and the table with related information. You specify the column that contains the data that you want, and the function follows an existing many-to-one relationship to fetch the values from the specified column in the related table. If a relationship does not exist, you must create a relationship. When the related function performs a lookup, it examines all the values in the specified table, regardless of any filters that may have been applied. The related function needs a row context, therefore it can only be used in a calculated column in expression, where the current row context is unambiguous, whereas nested functions in an expression that uses a table scanning function, such as SUMX gets the value from the current row, then scans another table for instance of that value. So if I want to pull in the related product name, I can set that equal to the related function. And as long as there is a relationship between the sales table and that table, which I do, sales and products have a relationship using product ID, I can pull over the columns. So I'm going to go over to T products at the bottom there. And I'm going to bring in the product name. I can do this as well for the categories. I can bring over anything I need from products. Price, product ID, product name, new column. I can add a new column to bring in the price of each product. I'll probably multiply this one and another column with the quantity if I need to. Go ahead and give the related function a try on your T sales table and create the related by product name, related by category name, and price of product column using the related function. A DAX function that might be useful to use is called the if function. I'm sure many of us have used the if function in other programming languages, or maybe even Microsoft Excel, where a logical test, a value if true, and a value if false are defined, and the logical test will trigger something true or something false in the results of a cell. The if function has made its way over to DAX, and if I create a new column in the sales table, I can check for a high sales flag. I want to mark anything that's greater than 700 with the high sale flag, everything else with a low sale flag. So the if function I can use to pass the sales table sales amounts, the total sales here. If it's greater than 700, I want to label that in quotes with the word high. If not, I'm going to label that in quotes with the word low. Those quotes are required for each of the arguments. And when I close out the if function parenthesis, I will see that new column for the high sales flag being created. Now I do want to go into a date and time function called DATEADD coming up next. Go ahead and practice the if function and add the high sales flag to the sales table using a new column, calculated column. The last function I want to get in is DATEADD. The DATEADD function returns a table that creates a column of dates shifted by a specified number of intervals. So I'm going to go over and I'm going to create from the Home tab a new measure here. And I'm going to call it sales last month. And I can use the calculate function for this. And I can use the expression from the sum of the sales of the total sales. And then I can use the DATEADD. I can pass this table sales dates. The number of intervals, I'll do -1 month. And the interval I'll do is a month. So that's my filter there. See how I'm using the DATEADD there? My DATEADD. I'm actually nesting it with the calculate function for this example. And let me put MM, since this is a measure, measure, sales last month. And I'm probably going to move that over to the measures table. And let's go over to the report view. I'm going to add in a card. And let's see, should be 0, I believe. Yeah, because this is all January sales. Empty. So go ahead and try that out for our final function in DAX that we've covered, the DATEADD, nesting in a calculate, nesting in a sum. Look at that at the very end. 3 functions are nested in there. By covering DAX functions, we'll understand like this nice comprehensive overview of the power of these abilities in Power BI reports. From basic to advanced, DAX functions are available for your use cases. Now that we've put together some DAX functions, some visualizations on our pages, in order to share this content with others in your organization, you actually have to publish this. And from the Home tab, if you select Publish, this is going to send it over to the Power BI service. Everyone should have access to a workspace called My Workspace that they can publish to. I'm going to save it to My Workspace. From here, I can share the semantic model I created, as well as the various report pages that I have. It's publishing it over to the Power BI service directly from here. And when I click on this link, it will prompt me on my browser and take me over to the service to where I can see my report online and share it with others. From here, I have the option to share within my organization, export, or even select file and embed this report to a public area, a public link. Keep in mind, under My Workspaces, you will have this opportunity if I need to, I can set up a refresh cycle. So if the data changes, I can automatically refresh it up to 8 times a day. Or I can just do a manual refresh of the data set. So the Power BI service allows you to set up this refresh cycle. You may need to set up a gateway for this to work, and you have to download the gateway from this page. You're probably going to use a personal gateway if it's on your local device. This way it can connect to your local files and actually set up a refresh cycle once you give it your credentials and allow it to log in for you. And once you get signed into your credentials, I don't want it to pop it up on the screen, the option to refresh will be available here. Up to 8 times a day. Keep in mind that once this report's shared, at the bottom here, I call it part 3. Once this report is shared, everyone will get live updates if you set up the refresh cycle for it. All right, we went ahead and completed the Power BI Intro to Data Analysis 3-part series. This session was advanced analysis and sharing insights. We've gone through advanced calculations, measures, tables, date and time functions, insight features, as well as publishing options. Hopefully everyone enjoyed this course and learned plenty. Be sure to check out Part 1 and Part 2 if you haven't. My name is Faz Kareem. Now with Learnit.
Thanks for watching. To earn certificates and watch our courses without ads, check out LearnitAnytime.com.